everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Carol Jenkins. Our program is Black America, and today we're excited to be interviewing Cole Brown, all the way from Australia. He is the author of Greyboy, Finding Blackness in a White World, which is a fascinating read. Cole, thanks so much for being with us today. You'll have to explain why you are in Australia. You're our first Australian interview.
Well, I am excited to have that distinction. There's not many of us out here, so I might hold on to that distinction for a little while. I moved here for a job in February, actually, pretty much unrelated, to be honest, to the book, but came here obviously in an interesting time, and it's been an interesting few months watching my country from a long way away.
From a long way away, and
yeah.
You make reference to James Baldwin, who did the same thing, you know, who took some distance to, first he said, to save himself, and then to be able to evaluate this country that really does not do well by Black people. So tell us what you've been able to observe so far.
Yeah, you know, as I mentioned, I got here in February, so I think that the two major forces since then, one, COVID, obviously. Sydney and Australia just handled it better. I mean, it just underscores the importance of good governance. I mean, we took it really seriously in the beginning, and now it is still a presence, but in some ways a thing of the past. So that was one sort of stark thing. But in the context of this conversation, as far as sort of race and race relations over what was the American summer, it was really difficult. It was really difficult to see, you know, the pain that has so clearly been found on the streets in the U.S. I'm from Philly, and just within the last few days, we've had our own incident of police violence, and it's been really difficult to watch that, and also develop a greater appreciation for how race as we view it in America is just such a construction. I mean, you step outside of that context and it just isn't discussed in the same way here. And that's disorienting at first until you sort of understand that you're in a different environment.
The introduction to your book was interesting too. I'm going to talk about the women who are engaged. Yeah. The introduction written by Elaine Winterroth, you know, with this whole concept of the difference between who we are and what we're perceived as, you know. And then, of course, in a little bit, I want to talk about the letter that your mother wrote. And as I say, every parent probably needs to do the same thing to their children, you know, if not outright apologizing for what did not go exactly right, at least explaining, you know, why what happened to them in their childhood. So let's talk about the construct you talk about of being Black, and for you the complication being Black but also being well off, and which does not meet the concept that most people have about Black people.
Well, I think that's it, and that's sort of the central tension of the book is you know, the book in many ways charts my journey to adulthood, but more importantly to identity, and those are not always sort of one and the same. And I think that was a journey that was made more difficult. That was at some points sort of awkward, and there was some sort of consternation. As I tried to grapple with this clearly sort of broadly accepted archetype for what Blackness was in the environment that I was in. There was clear expectations for what Blackness was or should be. And I was just as clearly not that. And you know, sort of not in a better or less than, just as a fact. And as a result of that, there was just, as is outlined in the book, there was sort of some awkward encounters, but also some very painful encounters as I tried to grapple with that. Elaine talks about it in the foreword, as you mentioned. She's biracial and sort of had her own confrontation with it, existing outside of this very limited view of Blackness that at times we have in the U.S. But
you, and this is the difficulty, you know, in America, what you think is the best thing I can do for my child is to put him or her in the best school that's possible, even if he's the only one or two, you know, Black people. And that environment, and as we know from our own family, can be daunting. Talk to us a little bit. Both of your parents are corporate executives, so you know, you were able to live a privileged life, but find yourself in a white world as a Black child. So talk to talk to us about that.
Yeah, so I think it's important to underscore. I was asked the question recently, sort of like, is it worth it? You know, are the costs and benefits of choices of being in that environment worth it? And my firm answer to that is yes. Like I wouldn't change anything about my upbringing if I had a chance to. I think I've been afforded opportunities that have just been phenomenal, and I don't regret any of that. But I will say an unintended consequence of that sort of ascension into, you know, the upper middle class, that has come over, you know, the last few generations for some families is that you find yourself in a context that is, as you said, a white world, where you are the only one of your kind in any room you walk into. That comes with its own brand of difficulty. That comes with its own sort of set of challenges, right? And as I mentioned earlier, I mean, chiefly among those is trying to negotiate all these expectations for what you are or should be. I've already talked about the set of expectations that come from that white world. There's also sort of a different set of expectations that come from your Black upbringing.
Exactly.
You know, in my case, my cousins in West Virginia and my mother's side of the family in Ethiopia, and these are all competing identities, sort of warring to lay claim on a single body.
Right. We often, and we used to do it every single interview, ask our guests to place themselves in Black America. And for you, that becomes a very long but fascinating story. So
Right.
how do you summarize that?
Yeah, one could write a book on it. I think
and
that,
you've done a great job. Fascinating. Yeah.
I thank you. I would say that I am all of those things, and it's taken me a while to sort of own all of those things as one Black identity, but I firmly think it is at this point. So I am just as sort of West Virginian and Indianan, which is what my father's side of the family is, as I am Ethiopian, which is my mother's side, as I am, you know, just sort of Black American in the upbringing that I had in Philly. I think that those are all part of my Black identity and sort of how I express it.
Right, and you write about the Black table in school, which of course is
Yes.
always sort of the defining moment, no matter how mixed you are or what the heritage is, your decision to sit at the Black table or not,
Yes.
and also whether or not they will accept you at the Black table or
Right.
not. So talk to us a little.
It's interesting. There's a few of these topics that in some ways I was dismayed. In some ways it's been sort of just funny, the encounters I've had, where I'll talk to people that are generations older than me. You know, I'll talk to people like my grandparents' age,
Right.
and they had the same, you know,
Exactly.
we're dealing with these
Always
same
the
issues.
same. Always.
Right. Sometimes in the same way, to a point that was, you know, in some ways disappointing. But I think that does speak to hopefully some truth that I tried to tap into here. So for me, as you mentioned, the Black table was a major force for me. You know, I grew up in an environment, as I've mentioned, with all white kids, and sat with those white kids in my schooling environment. We called the particular kind of white kid the lax bros. I sat with the lax bros for years. When it became clear that we were operating in that space very differently, that led to some very difficult interactions, led to some depression, which I outline in the book. And and taking that step, exiting an environment that was clearly not healthy for my development, and entering the Black table, where I encountered people that had very different realities than me oftentimes, but were negotiating this space in very similar ways. It was crucial for me. It was crucial for my growth. And to this day, the guys that sat around that Black table with me are my closest friends on earth.
All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about the depression, because you were affected by it extremely negatively. Not to say that, you know, growing up, that everybody doesn't go through that kind of, you know, turmoil as they're turning into adults. You know, but you had a serious problem, and as we say, your mother's letter addressed that somewhat. But talk to us about what happened to you.
I try my best to unpack that in the book. There's one chapter where I speak to it pretty explicitly, where when I was, you know, probably 12, 13, 14 years old, as you said, some of that was just kid stuff. Some of that was, you know, discomfort growing up. but there was, I think in my case at times, something extra that comes from the isolating effect of being sort of the only one of your kind in that environment. And I had some pretty serious issues, as you said. And I write in the book that sort of there was an attempt on my life in some kind of twice. It was the first time I've written about it, and I don't often speak about it. So excuse me as I try to work my way through it. But
Sure.
but it
Difficult,
was
but experimentation with
yes,
drugs, alcohol, etc. I mean,
all of it. And those were difficult years, without a doubt, and came, as I mentioned, sort of very close to making some final decisions, which would have been horrible. So I think that what pulled me out of that in many ways is kind of the black table that we mentioned earlier, and then being fortunate to have particularly in my mother, but two parents that sort of did their work as well to pull me out of those years.
right. But now this letter from your mother, I mean, she has her own chapter, which is, I mean, it really moved me because raising children is difficult. Being a child is difficult, and the things that you go through. And in it, she gives you more history about your Ethiopian life, your grandmother, who was one of the first woman senators in Ethiopia, and you went often to Ethiopia, so you knew that. But she gives you this rich history. But she was also apologizing to you.
Yeah, that chapter and sort of the conversations that birthed that chapter were in some ways like the first really adult moments, frankly, I've had, the really adult interactions I've had with my mother. I think that you're right that there is a certain coming of age element when you're able to have those conversations and acknowledge that neither of you is perfect. Like my mother read the book and learned a lot about her baby. There's a lot of stories in there that I had not told my mother before. Similarly, my mother has lived a remarkable life that frankly, I didn't know a lot of that history, both in my mother's life and in my grandmother's life. So the letter itself is a response to the chapter that precedes it, discussing depression and I think some of the guilt that sort of she shoulders for those years. But what birthed that chapter, I mean, all the conversations and what ultimately ends up on the page is just incredibly valuable to me, has really been sort of a moment that I wouldn't trade for the world.
Right. So I recommend this book for anybody growing up and anybody raising up children. It's it's a great meeting of points of view. And you also write a moving chapter about your grandfather, who used to have a very serious view of corporal punishment and the effect that had on you.
Yeah. I'm not even sure I learned the term corporal punishment until many years later. I mean, like, I was spanked like a lot of kids are spanked, or at least were at one point. I guess maybe that's not the case anymore. My grandfather was old school. And that's another thing that I just wouldn't trade for the world. My grandfather was grumpy. He grew up in West Virginia and Indiana. He was a public servant for his whole life. And by the time we were close, when he was in his late 70s, early 80s, he was just a grumpy old man that had fought through all sorts of stuff. The Korean War, the Civil Rights Movement. I mean, he had earned his grumpiness. And I loved him dearly. And I think that what he handed down to me in terms of, that soul, I mean, that history that many people my age have to read about in textbooks. There's value there. There's merit in that history that I don't think everybody gets.
Right. So it's a terrific, as I keep plying you with these compliments about your work. You're all of what? Are you 25 yet? No.
I was 24 when it released. I'm 25 now. Yeah.
Okay. Well, happy birthday. I mean, it's it's a great thing to come out of. It was an assignment in college. You were supposed to write a book about finance, which is what you were, the path that you were on, and in writing this memoir have turned the course of your life.
Yeah, so that's exactly right. It was supposed to be a very long essay on a business I wanted to start. But when I was sitting in that class the first day, and he said we were writing that many words, this was a story that was like, it felt like I was just waiting on somebody to tell me I had to write it. So I convinced him to let me do this, thinking that it would be, maybe a semester long, year long project. It was 4 years long because I think it took, and I think I needed
Right.
every one of those days, both to unpack a lot of my stuff, but also to get the stories on the page from many of the kids that I interviewed, which was really important to me.
And you are writing the screenplay, of course, and we're expecting you
Yes.
to come back home, right? What is that going to be like, coming back
Yes.
home?
So I am wrestling with that literally as we speak. When I am coming back home, I am coming back home. Certainly within the next few months. Who knows? I mean, we're on the eve of something monumental either way, right? In
Right.
terms of this election. And so to answer your question, I have no idea what it's going to be like coming back home, because I don't think anyone knows what home will be like in as little as a week from today. I am working on the screenplay, uh, hoping for something exciting to happen there, and hope I can come back and talk about it when that happens.
Right. And you found a great audience for this book. You do an Instagram interviews, with people who
Yes.
find themselves in exactly the same, situation as you. Black, but in a white world, and complicated. So talk to
Right.
us about the people that you're interviewing, and what they're saying to you.
So the interview series I was really pretty thrilled about, because that's once I got through the unpacking of my story phase of this book, then it was about that. It was about having conversations that I've been hoping to have my whole life with people that walk through the world similarly. So there were conversations with people that grew up similarly. There's Amira Razul, who also grew up in sort of white spaces and has founded this phenomenal company, The Folklore. There was a conversation with Yara Shahidi, who obviously is on Blackish, and in many
Right.
ways plays, and Grownish, and in many ways plays the female version of my life story
Right. Right. It was a
on those
great,
shows.
yeah, it was a great
Yeah,
interview. I got to see some of it, and that was terrific. Yeah. So she
she's
was
excellent.
leading the female version of your life.
Yes, at least on the screen. In many ways, that was the first time I had seen my life portrayed in media. So I was thrilled to have that conversation. And then there's people that didn't grow up necessarily quite similarly. Daryl Worley is one who's now a professional NFL player, sat at the black table with me. We had very different realities, but I think that this experience of feeling in between, feeling gray, is one that can perhaps be extended beyond sort of the very specific experience that I try to describe.
Right. Right. It's anybody who doesn't fit, yeah,
Yeah,
who doesn't fit
absolutely.
in, this construct of whiteness that we live in. So talk to us about, and we're having this conversation a little before the election, because or
Yeah.
else we would have been responding precisely to it. But your expectation of how this country changes, are you optimistic, that
Um,
we can do this?
uh, Frankly, no, no, I'm not. I, hope, just for hope's sake, is something that in many ways I think I relinquished. I grew out of, I let go in 2016. I was hopeful in 2016 in the face of fact. And and as a result, I was disappointed. I am not that way. I refuse to be that way in 2020. Uh, so
You
I think
refuse to
that's
be
fact.
hopeful in 2020. You don't.
I refuse to be hopeful in the face of a clear counter argument. And the
Right.
clear counter argument in this case is a lot of division has been sowed. And in the short term, in the medium term, irrespective of what the outcome of this election is, it's going to take a lot of healing. I mean, it's going to take a lot of work to get through that. So even if the outcome that I'd like to happen in this election happens, I don't think that that'll be the immediate fix that some might sort of hope for. I don't think that it's just a return to normal, the day after, or even very many weeks and months after. Now, I will say, taking a slightly longer view of history,
Mhm.
are we capable of it? I think absolutely. Our country has overcome this level of division and more in the past. Um, but it is, I do think sort of, I don't think sort of 2020, 2021, I'm going to see the end of all of this.
You talk a bit about the prospect of having children. Will you raise them in America, or will you raise them outside so that they too can experience somewhat less discrimination and heartache?
I hope. You mentioned Baldwin earlier, and Baldwin, writes about how he had to leave, but always knew he must come back. And I think I feel that way. I think that it'll be necessary, when and if I have children one day. I think you need to leave America to understand its many shortcomings, its many achievements. All of that is better understood at an objective distance. That said, America is home, and I love America, including all of those shortcomings and achievements.
Right.
And I will be returning shortly, and my children will need to know it as home as well.
So your mother says now, I love that when in the description of the book, it's so great. It says he lives in the United States and Australia, and you say it's not as cool as it seems because I'm with my mother, But
yes.
But I understand you found your own place now, or what is?
Yes, that happened recently. So that requires a bit of explanation. I came to Australia not intending to move in with my mom, and then a pandemic happened. My mother had already lived here, and it just didn't quite make sense. So I, as I like to think of myself, a grown person, moved back in with my mom for a few months. That said, we're good. Like, I love my mom. We made it through, but we are now in separate homes, and I am calling to you from my own place.
From your own place. Listen, you're only 25. You have until 35 or 40 before people will insist that you move out. No.
I will let her know you said that, because I think I was on her clock, but I'll let her know you said so.
So tell us in the final minutes that we have here, who are you looking at as inspiration to your writing, to your work? You're now totally out of finance, and you are in peace building, working to make this country, we hope, a better place.
Right. That's a great question. So much of the writing that was done in this book was inspired by Ta-Nehisi Coates. That's almost a cliche answer at this point because he's such a megastar, but he is still the writer I most look to in times of need, his older writing and much of his commentary today. And I do that with many writers, frankly. I read almost exclusively, Toni Morrison and Richard Wright and Baldwin. And there are current examples. I love Zadie Smith. But I turn to the past much more than I'm in the present, to be honest. Right.
Well, Ta-Nehisi is an analyst, which is what you're doing in your book as well. You're analyzing an entire country, a system of segregation, even though we don't think of it that way much anymore. So you're firmly committed to writing, we hope, and to working, analyzing our society. And
absolutely, I think that is I've gotten an itch now, and I think the experience of this first book was well worth it, and there will be another.
Great. So what do you have to say about Black America? One final statement. How do you assess it, looking at it?
Yeah. From
America and from outside? What would you say about Americans and Black America?
I think that you brought up hope earlier, and I think it's a trying time for Black America. Again, I'm from Philly, and literally within the last couple days, I've been watching images that have deeply disturbed me. But if there's a place for hope, in that realm, I feel it. In that realm, I feel hope. I feel hope for Black America when I look at Philly and other cities like it that have had this trying summer, and just the multicultural coalition that has been on the streets, in favor of us and in favor of attempting to embrace us as true Americans. I think that, again, there's a lot of work, there's a lot of healing, but there might be space for hope on that front.
Terrific. Well, Cole Brown, author of Greyboy, Finding Blackness in a White World. It's a great book. It's a great read. Again, everybody should take a look at it if you're in a complicated family, and that's every family that we know about. Thank you so much for writing the book. We look forward to the film and to your next writing.
Thank you so much for having me.
Cole Brown. And thank you all out there for watching us today. I'm Carol Jenkins. The program is Black America, and we will see you the next time.